Hello, my name's Tom Walker. Welcome to That'll Be the Day. Now, a little bit like the last podcast, this one features an item that was broadcast on BBC Radio Merseyside. It went out on Paul Salt's breakfast programme on Tuesday, March the 9th. Before you hear the piece, as always, the music at the start of the podcast is part of a track called That'll Be the Day by the Liverpool band The Vow. And at the end of this podcast, I'll be featuring a track by The Vow. To find out which one it is, you'll have to stay tuned.
The sound of Liverpool. Paul Salt at breakfast. BBC Radio Merseyside.
Now, it's been a long and difficult 12 months for all of us, really, but the 3 lockdowns have seriously limited our freedoms to go out and about, haven't they? And when we have gone out to the shops or maybe for a little bit of exercise, we've had to remember to wear our masks and keep 2 metres from other people. How has the last year been for the 60,000 blind and partially sighted people who live on Merseyside and in West Cheshire? Well, our reporter Tom Walker, who is himself visually impaired, has caught up with 3 blind and partially sighted people who came on Radio Merseyside last year. Laura Kennedy, Naomi Ditchfield and Ian Mitchell.
I'm standing outside a convenience store on a very busy Lodge Lane, which is about 1.5 miles to the south of Liverpool city centre. Luckily for me, I'm quite confident, and going shopping doesn't give me any concerns. It isn't like that for everyone, however. Laura, who lives in Bromborough, hasn't found the lockdown easy.
I've just been keeping in touch with people on the phone and by text message, and when we could see each other, you know, sticking to the rules and seeing each other outside in groups of 6 when we could. But I think since the winter lockdown, since kind of the December lockdown, it's been a lot harder, and I haven't seen anybody really apart from the one person who's in my support bubble.
I'm about to go into the shop to buy some milk, so I better get my mask on. Laura says she's only been in a shop once since last March. When she does go shopping, Laura thinks she's going to need some help.
It's more knowing the one-way systems and having somebody go with me for the first time to explain what the one-way system looks like, where the glass is, the perspex glass, kind of understanding whether you have to queue outside still or kind of what it's like. Is it almost back to normal outside, or is it as it was last March where it was you queued outside and you waited to go in?
Before lockdown, Naomi was a regular volunteer for the local visual impairment charity Bradbury Fields, and with her guide dog Dixie, attended Liverpool FC home games. To do her shopping during lockdown, Naomi went for the online option, but that became a problem.
I couldn't get the slots, so I had to get in touch with the RNIB because they were the ones that were assisting people with visual impairment to get priority slots with the supermarkets. So that was a big help because I didn't know about that.
One issue in supermarkets and elsewhere has been social distancing. Ian Mitchell from South Liverpool is partially sighted and works with visually impaired people.
Most people can see and determine for themselves what a 2 metre distance is. But if you've got very limited sight or no sight at all, that concept of keep 2 metres is just a concept. You can't measure it, you can't determine it for yourself, and you became very dependent on other people giving you a 2 metre berth.
Ian says he will need to work on rebuilding his confidence.
I still feel nervous going out and being in a group of people, and I don't think that's unique to me as a blind or a partially sighted person. I think there's a large chunk of society that will feel nervous about re-engaging in the way that they used to, say, this time last year.
And Laura can understand that. She says she's lost a lot of the confidence she had before the lockdown was introduced.
It's as if all the hard work you've done, all the effort and the confidence you've built has kind of taken you a little bit backwards to where you were. And, you know, not to be negative, I think I will get back to where I was, but I don't think there's the understanding out there of what it's like for people with visual impairments or other disabilities or conditions.
And Ian is of the view that local charities that work with visually impaired people have a huge role in helping them to regain their confidence and independence.
The sooner that we can open up those centres where people feel confident, where they know people, where they know how to get around, I think that will be the start of it, to just try and encourage people and reassure people that life can start to return back to some sort of normal.
Tom Walker reporting there. Well, listening along to that and joining me now is Phil Longworth, the Chief Executive of Bradbury Fields, the Merseyside charity which provides services to blind and partially sighted people. A very good morning to you, Phil.
Morning, Paul.
First of all, how has lockdown been for you?
Well, it's like the others with a sight problem. You're facing life doing very, very different things, and conscious that confidence actually just drops. You know, you're not quite sure what the world is out there. And at some stage, we're all going to have to sort of deal with that. From a work perspective, given that many of our people are in the older age group generally, we've closed the centre because on public health guidance, you can't actually have people together. The social distancing ruling has been horrendous. And that also applies to some of our groups that go out and use other city centre facilities. So we've changed all the services that we've needed to offer. We do much more phone support now. We've with a group of volunteers and staff, we've delivered food where it's needed. We've worked alongside other agencies as well to make that happen too. Prescriptions, everyday issues for people have been a problem. So the support's there, telephone, befriending once a week, and telephone activity groups during the week, whether it's quizzes, whether it's a history session, a music session, whatever it may be. So we've had to adapt all of our services to meet the needs. But the message to everybody still is, look, don't suffer in silence. If there's anything you need support with, please ring in and ask for us. And we're responding to most of those needs pretty quickly as well. So a very different world than we had 12 months ago. And I think the big issue is going to be, as your three speakers have already said, it's this confidence impact. Blind people traditionally have and often have felt isolated within the community, even when they're in the middle of it. If you can't see and you're not interacting with people, that's quite isolating. You know, I think the rest of the community now understand that more because of lockdown. But we need to, and we think we're going to probably work with 1,000 people that are going to have real confidence issues, that we've got to try and get that confidence back over a period of time.
Wow, 1,000 people. You know, what came across from Tom's report there, listening to it, was that, and this goes, you know, everyone's in this boat to a certain extent, the anxiety that is going to come from going out shopping and you know, doing that social distancing. We're all feeling that, but it's multiplied if you have a sight issue, I would have thought. Should more have been done by the government to sort out those issues for blind and partially sighted people?
I think that the government reacted with the support of some of the national organisations, which was really appreciated. But perhaps all of that reaction was a touch slow, as we were all trying to get used to what all of this was, how much it meant. I mean, we thought initially we might be in lockdown for 2 or 3 weeks, didn't we? And little did anybody think it would be this long. So I think that people did try to have conversations, did try to get the supermarkets to work, as Naomi said. You know, the RNIB supported her and then told her about the work they'd done with supermarkets around priority slots. So I think some work's being done. We had in the summertime, they finally got to the point of issuing sort of guidance notes on how do you guide a blind person. If you've got to have social distance and you've got somebody who's totally blind, how do you guide them? You know, so to try and get rid of some of those myths and say, look, this is doable. And now we've all had to work very differently. You know, we've got new PPE systems in place. We've got all the famous rules in our centre. When we do have some people in, you know, when we're back to opening up again, we've started to try and do one-to-one assessments in centre. So we've got all of the rules that are in place there. And I think everybody's responded as best they can. What often happens is you get some conflict between what the national government will announce and then how it transpires into the guidance or the legislative frameworks as we move through the process.
And finally, I guess the big question for your service users is, and it was certainly on Ian's mind there, is when will the Bradbury Centre reopen? I hope at this stage that we may see some getting back to some normality in terms of assessment mid-April.
but that's assuming that there isn't a major negative impact from opening the schools, and we don't see cases increasing again. So hopefully we'll start that. I think that we then will follow, as we've tried to do, the guidelines from the government, from local health service providers, and therefore hopefully we'll see some normality begin to emerge, towards the end of June, I suspect.
Well, fingers crossed for all of that. Thank you, Phil, for coming on and talking to me today.
No problem at all. Thanks for having us.
That is Phil Longworth, the Chief Executive of Bradbury Fields, which, of course, is a Merseyside charity providing services to blind and partially sighted people.
OK, so that's it. That was the piece that went out on BBC Radio Merseyside. Thanks very much to Laura Kennedy, Naomi Ditchfield and Ian Mitchell for taking part. And thanks also to Phil Longworth for getting out of bed early to answer Paul Salt's questions. Now, of course, the big question is, which track am I going to play by The Vow? Well, with summer on the way, what else could it be other than A Walk in the Sunshine?
Let's take a walk in the sunshine and let the world know it's still mine. It's been ignoring me for so long. The positivity tastes nice. The probability feels right. The sleazy city's a long way gone. No one can take what is already mine. I've earned my place in the sunshine. God only knows I have trolled back through time in memory of all those I have loved. The rainy season was in me, a howling wind on a cruel sea. You fight your enemies on your own. Though time and tide have come to me, and all of life has passed through me, I face infinity still unknown. No one can take what is already mine. I've earned my place in the sunshine. God only knows I have trolled back through time in memory of all those I have loved. Let's take a walk in the sunshine. 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 Let's take a walk in the sunshine.